Tisha B'Av itself. And so Tisha B'Av literally means the 9th day of the month of Av, which historically has been a very horrible day for the Jewish people. It's called the National Day of Jewish Mourning.
Did you say it was the same for the one that was at the beginning of the fast at the beginning? What was that one called?
The 17th of Tammuz.
Yeah, that's also a bad day, or
right? But as you progress, it gets worse.
Oh, okay, so it's only somewhat bad, only two.
Well, the 17th day of Tammuz, one of the things that happened was that the attacking armies attacking the city of Jerusalem breached the outer wall, and now it was inside the city with hand-to-hand combat. On the 9th day of Av, they won.
Okay.
They got the temple and lit it on fire. It burnt until the middle of the 10th day. So it was progressively worse. So on Tisha B'Av, we know that it is a very seriously difficult day. Traditionally, we know from the story of the Torah that is the day that the spies returned from Israel in order to say about the horrible things that went on. And the Medrash tells us that Hashem says to the Jewish people, you cry today for no reason. When the spies returned, they told them how terrible it would be and difficult it would be to get the land of Israel. So the Jews were crying. And Hashem says, you're crying for no reason. I told you you're going to get the land. You're going to get the land. And he says, but on this day you will cry for a reason. And that became the day of extreme mourning. So besides that, the first temple was destroyed on the 9th day of Av. The second temple was destroyed on the 9th day of Av. The city of Beitar was attacked and thousands of Jews were killed in the city of Beitar. There was a number, and quite a few things went on the 9th day of Av. In ancient history, even in more modern times, in the Middle Ages, we know that the Inquisition was signed, the Spanish Inquisition and the expulsion of the Jews was signed on the 9th day of Av. There are other people who have told us, I've never checked to see if it's true, but that World War I officially began on the 9th day of Av, and that the atomic bomb was dropped at Nagasaki on the 9th day of Av, all of which I've never substantiated, but certainly it is not a good day. And because of that, we believe that we have to reinforce within ourselves the need to feel the loss of no longer having the temples. And therefore, by not having the temples, we don't have what we call the Jewish Commonwealth. That is, we don't have a country that is a Jewish country that follows a theocratic law, thus follows the Torah. We don't have such a thing. The land of Israel today is a wonderful place, right? It's a great place. There's more Torah learned there than anywhere in the world. It is a Jewish homeland, but it is not considered like the land of Israel when the dispersion is ended, right? When we are brought back. Then we have the temple, then the laws follow the laws of the Torah. So we are still living in a mournful time because the temple has not been rebuilt. And because of it, we understand it's hard for us to feel that mourning. Here we are in the year 2009. How can it be anticipated that we are going to feel the lack of a temple that has not been around for over 2,000 years? How can we feel that loss? We have a lot of trouble even understanding or visualizing at all what the temple was like, let alone feeling a pain that we don't have it. And therefore, when most people think that the reason that we have all of these laws, which we're going to discuss, is to express the pain that we feel, I believe it's actually not the case. I believe that these laws are all given to us in order to sensitize us to the lack that we are living with by the temple being destroyed. It's not the other way around. Not that we have such profound pain within us that we say to ourselves, how can I eat on this day? How could I eat meat at this time? How could I celebrate on this day? It's just not true. And we know that that's not the case. We don't feel that. So we do these things in order to be constant reminders to us of what happened as a way to sensitize ourselves so that we should feel something. That there should be some idea, some feeling that comes out of this that would give us a more intense experience. And therefore, the rabbis instituted these laws. These laws for Tisha B'Av are quite severe. They begin on Erev Tisha B'Av. They continue until noon on the day after Tisha B'Av in most years. Not this year. We'll discuss when we get to it. Let us begin inside here. So we begin with Erev Tisha B'Av. Erev Tisha B'Av, there are a number of laws that you have things that we don't normally do and some things that we should do. So, for instance, there are those who say that as of the afternoon of Erev Tisha B'Av, that one should already start to desist, holding back from learning Torah. Because on Tisha B'Av we don't learn Torah, because Torah makes us happy when we learn it, and therefore we don't learn it then. So on Erev Tisha B'Av some people don't. Our custom is that while we may not have public classes that are on regular topics, people do learn themselves in the afternoon on Erev Tisha B'Av. You'll see somewhat, for instance, in a shul, let's say that Erev Tisha B'Av was Shabbos, and it begins on Saturday night, which is not uncommon. We would not have classes on Tisha B'Av afternoon, but if you wanted to read something yourself, you would be allowed to. I mean, Erev Tisha B'Av afternoon, especially on Shabbos when we don't mourn. We are not supposed to fast on Erev Tisha B'Av. It's important, besides the fact that you can get ill if you fast 2 days in a row, but you're not supposed to, because Erev Tisha B'Av is like Erev of a holiday. Just like on Erev of any holiday or Erev of Rosh Chodesh, we have certain rules. We don't say Tachanun already because it's starting to become holiday-like. Tisha B'Av is referred to in the prophets as a moed, as a holiday. It is a holiday that is very sad, but since it does have some aspects of a holiday with it, we then can understand from that then that some of the things that we don't do on Erev holidays, we don't do on Erev Tisha B'Av, and that would be like saying Tachanun, and that would be fasting. We also don't fast.
But it is a fast day.
That's on Tisha B'Av. This is Erev Tisha B'Av, the day before.
So Tisha B'Av, the fast starts like 6 a.m. or?
No, it starts at night.
At night?
Right.
Oh, okay.
So, one of the things that we do, which is very important to understand, is called the Seuda HaMafsekes. The Seuda HaMafsekes is a meal which is particular to be the last meal that one eats on Erev Tisha B'Av. In other words, it is the dividing meal. We have a similar meal on Yom Kippur, right, a final meal, but not in the same way. But this meal is very similar to the first meal that a mourner eats when they return from the cemetery. And this meal is a meal of mourning. A person eats it while sitting on the floor. If it's hard for you to sit on the floor, you can sit on a pillow. But we eat it in a sense of mourning. And this meal usually consists of just a piece of bread and a hard-boiled egg. So, and then we eat it alone. We do not eat it in a group. And the reason is so that we should not have to bench in a group. It's just like we do when one has to mourn. Coming back from the cemetery, when one is a mourner, you have the same rule. The first thing you do is you go into the house, you have a piece of bread and an egg while sitting on the floor by yourself. And we do the same thing here. It's a sign of mourning for the Jewish Commonwealth. To the letter of the law, one is not supposed to eat after you've eaten the Seuda HaMafsekes. However, if you have indicated that you do plan to eat after this meal, you are allowed to until sunset. So if you would decide that, say, sunset would be at 8:30, and you would just have your Seuda HaMafsekes at 7, and you're done at 7:30, it doesn't take that long to eat a piece of bread and an egg, and you finish benching, now you have an hour until the fast starts. If you indicate before you have this meal that you are going to eat or drink, or you may eat or drink after the meal, then you'll be allowed to. If you do not, and you actually consider this to be the final meal, then the norm is that you can't eat after that meal. So one should always have in mind that you will, so that you can brush your teeth, you can clean up, you can have some water, you can have something to eat if you want. However, what is very important is that you should have a meal before this meal, right? A regular meal. Right? It doesn't have to be a Shabbos meal, but a meal, because you don't want to be hungry on Tisha B'Av. So what's usually done is that you would have a late, let's say, even because it starts so late here, you could have a dinner time meal, like at a regular dinner time. Then customarily what we would do is we would try to organize a mincha service in the synagogue, and then the men would come to that, and that would make a division between that meal and when they come home to have this Seuda HaMafsekes. Because you're not allowed to have one meal right after another, because it's a waste. That you would eat bread and then bench, and then wash, eat bread and then bench, right, to do it twice in a row. So you have to make some type of division. So one of the ways is by going to services. Another one is just waiting a little while. But you would make a big meal, eat that meal, and then a little later you would have the secondary meal called the Seuda HaMafsekes. Right, and that would be the last meal, but you can have other things as long as you indicate it. You can drink, eat, pretty much whatever you like within the boundaries of what you can eat and drink on the 9 days. When it comes to benching, as I said, you're supposed to bench by yourself, and afterwards, unless you've indicated that you're going to eat, you should not eat or drink. And you really should indicate that you will eat so that you can do that. Now, when we get to the Tisha B'Av itself, the way we see Tisha B'Av is that the harshest part of it is the beginning. And as it goes along, it becomes less harsh. So, for instance, all of the prohibitions that we have in Tisha B'Av, we have for the entire Tisha B'Av. There are some that are peculiar only to the night of Tisha B'Av in the morning. The most prevalent one is that in the night and the morning, we don't sit on chairs. Like a mourner does not sit on chairs. So you can sit on a low chair, you can sit on a low bench, you can sit on a pillow on the ground, all those types of things. But you can't sit in a normal chair just as if you were mourning. And that would be from the time that Tisha B'Av starts until the middle of the day, about 1:30 or so. We'll have it on our schedule, the exact time for that, so that you can come and then you'd be able to get up and sit in chairs at that point. Another thing that we do when the middle of the day comes is that at that point it's mincha time, and so we will daven mincha, and we'll do that wearing tefillin, because the men don't wear tefillin in the morning. My phone's ringing, huh?
Next time.
I can't really hear it. So as I was saying, the putting on tefillin and a talis we don't do in the morning of Tisha B'Av, because the morning at that time, the M-O-U-R morning, is much more intense. So the men would then put on their tefillin at mincha time. They can do it right away when mincha time begins, or they can wait till later in the day. If somebody's unable to come to minyan until later in the day, they'd put on their tefillin later in the day, as long as it's before nightfall. So the main prohibitions, as you see here, on Tisha B'Av, are eating and drinking, bathing and washing, anointing and cohabitation, wearing of shoes, and learning Torah. Those are the general rules, and I'll go through each one. So eating and drinking. This is, of course, not a Torah law. This is rabbinic, because Tisha B'Av is a rabbinic fast, as all fasts are other than Yom Kippur. However, this was dictated by the prophets, so it has a certain significance. The fast begins at nightfall rather than in the morning, as the other fasts do other than Yom Kippur. And one is not allowed to eat or drink at all on these days. Exceptions can be as follows, and we're going to go through a few of them. Pregnant and nursing women. Under normal circumstances, any other fast day other than Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, we would pretty much make a wholesale statement that pregnant and nursing women should not fast on those days. In fact, there are many women who don't fast on the other fast days at all, because it's difficult to do, and much of the work that women do is work that they can't simply just not feel well and lay down. They have to take care of children, they have and so forth. So therefore, if they can't fast, then they don't. But on Tisha B'Av, we are stricter. When it comes to pregnant and nursing women, if they're told by a doctor that it would be harmful to them to eat, to fast, that is, or harmful to the baby, because let's say the baby had been ill, and now the milk will not be as filled as it should be because the mother is fasting, so then the mother would be allowed to break the fast in those circumstances. The mother or the pregnant woman could do that. After childbirth, so it is forbidden for a woman to fast after childbirth for 7 days. She is allowed for up to 30 days, according to most opinions, to not fast without even asking. Right? If she gave birth within the last 30 days and she doesn't want to fast, or she feels that it'll be too hard, she doesn't have to. But if it's the first week, she's not allowed to fast. So that's another one. Children. While we do want to educate children about the importance of fasting and every other mitzvah, one of the areas that people often make mistake in is that children fasting on Tisha B'Av. We do encourage children to fast on Yom Kippur, because there, if a child is old enough to understand it, they should really fast. A 12-year-old boy, an 11-year-old girl, 10, 11, anything in that area who have an understanding on Yom Kippur, we certainly encourage them to fast. And Tisha B'Av, if they have a clear understanding of the idea of mourning, of what it is that we're doing, then they could be encouraged to fast. If they don't fast and they're under a bar or bas mitzvah, there should not be any repercussions. But it's not like a form that they have to. Because the difference between Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av is that Yom Kippur is a Torah dictated date, and the following of it is very serious. And Tisha B'Av, it's from the prophets and from the rabbis, and it's not as severe. And even though we certainly want to be able to do it, a child, simply because they're a child, it's more difficult for them. So we don't push them to do it. If they choose to and they understand it, they can, but we don't push them to. Yes?
Can we, for the purpose of education, can we encourage them to fast part of it?
Certainly. That even with the pregnant and nursing women, it's preferable that that all of them fast until they feel they can't. Right? Under normal circumstances, like a pregnant woman or a nursing woman wouldn't even need to ask a doctor. If she feels sick, she'd normally be able to simply break the fast. In this case, she'd have to be more seriously sick to break the fast, or the doctor would have to tell her that she shouldn't fast. Rinsing out one's mouth. So on most fast days, it's perfectly allowed. On Yom Kippur, it is not at all allowed. On Tisha B'Av, the only way you'd be allowed to rinse out your mouth is if it was very troublesome, not very painful, because I don't think it's ever very painful, but it's very bothersome. If it's somewhat bothersome, you really should not do it. But if you are very bothered by it, then you're allowed to rinse out your mouth, like with a mouthwash kind of thing. But you should do it by using gravity on your side and not gargling it. Rather, you should do it like with your face facing down, so that you rinse out your mouth to the best you can, and then you spit it out, and there's less chance that you'll swallow it, because the swallowing of it is the issue. Medications. On all fast days, including Yom Kippur, you are allowed to take medications as long as you don't take any water or liquid with them. That's without even asking. If you have the ability to take a pill without a liquid, if you can physically do it, then you can simply choose to take pills. There's absolutely no problem. If you have a headache, you can take an aspirin, a Tylenol. If you have any type of medication that you take sometimes, not even all the times, and you feel the need for it that day, you're allowed to take it, as long as you don't drink with it. You just swallow the pill. If there's a more serious need, right, to take a pill because a person becomes very sick, then certainly, of course, you break the fast, and the person takes whatever medication they need to, because now they've become, quote, deathly ill. And deathly ill does not mean that they're dying, but it means that they're so sick that they are not able to function. They'd have to lay in bed. That's considered that sick. But otherwise, a person can take medication without drinking. Just you can choose to. So if you find out at 11 o'clock on Tisha B'Av morning you have a very bad headache, and you're able to take aspirin or Tylenol without water, and I'm not advising you to, I don't know the medical ramifications, but if you can, yeah, you're allowed to. And if you can't, so here's an interesting way to accomplish it. As I said, if there's a necessity, then you're allowed to take it, like any other necessity, if it saves a life and so forth. However, another way to do it is if you are having a serious need, but it's not life and death, but it's a serious need, and you can't take medication without water, then some of the rabbis I spoke to suggested that you take it with something similar to Pepto-Bismol. Pepto-Bismol, which is, of course, a stomach-coating medication, is not food. It's medication, but it's liquid. So by taking a pill with Pepto-Bismol, it accomplishes a number of things. One, it helps you swallow the pill like a liquid does. And number two, it coats your stomach against any inflammation that the medication may leave in your stomach because there's not a lot of liquid in there. So that is an alternative if you really need to have water. All right, eating. Of course, if you have to eat on Tisha B'Av because you're not well, or you're not obligated because you're younger or you have a baby. So all of the normal laws of eating come into play, of you would not only have to wash if you were eating bread, and you'd have to say the Birkat Hamazon, and in the Birkat Hamazon you would add the section that you say on Tisha B'Av in the prayers. Now there's a special prayer that you say in the Shemona Esrei when you're in shul. You would actually say that in the benching. You won't find that, of course, in the bencher, because we don't usually eat on Tisha B'Av. But if somebody had to eat, they would include that in their benching if they would be able to remember to do that, right, after they ate. So that's when you can eat. In general, I'm trying to think if there's any other exclusions. I don't know of any other. Yes?
Which part of the benching do we add the section?
I mean, where would we put in the Nachim? After the paragraph about Israel. Okay, the next section is bathing and washing. So as we've already had a series of increasing issues with bathing and washing, right, during the 3 weeks, right, there's some limitation on new clothes. Then during the 9 days, we do not wash our clothes and we don't bathe, right, during the entire 9-day period, as we discussed in the last class. However, on Tisha B'Av, it's even more severe. Not only do we not bathe on Tisha B'Av, we don't wash on Tisha B'Av. There are certain ways that we can wash, and we'll talk about them. But in general, we don't use water to wash, to bathe, and to shower, to clean ourselves on Tisha B'Av at all. It's considered a very serious, one of the main parts of it, of Tisha B'Av. Now, there are certain times when you are able to, like morning washing. That is, you get up in the morning, you want to do nagel wasser, right, where you wash your hands alternatively with a cup. So you're allowed to do that on Tisha B'Av morning, but you should not wash beyond your fingers, where your fingers meet your hand. You should only wash your fingers, not your entire hand. After using the washroom, if your hands become dirty from using the washroom, I mean literally dirty, not just because you were in the washroom, but they were actually dirty, then you can wash your hands with soap as needed. If you're washing your hands after coming out of the washroom, but they're not necessarily dirty, it's just that there's germs or whatever that are on it, so there you would also wash your hands only up to your knuckles, only your fingers you would wash. For cooking, since you're allowed to cook on Tisha B'Av, in order to have food for after Tisha B'Av, or for people who can eat on Tisha B'Av, so you often have to wash items like meat. You might rinse it off. You might have to run water on it. You also would want to wash your hands for cleanliness so that you don't convey any type of sickness, and that would be permissible. You'd be allowed to wash the meat and other types of food like it's normal. When it comes to washing your hands, if you are actually using your hands in the preparation, literally using your hands in the preparation, so then you can wash your entire hands. If you are not, then you can wash your hands up to the knuckles once again, where in order to prepare, but that's if you're not going to use your hands directly.
And if you cooked, could you wash the dishes or not?
Well, you couldn't. Let me see. You couldn't wash it. No, you could not wash the dishes because you can't you can't clean them with the water.
Oh, how sad.
Put them in the dishwasher and run it after.
Dishwasher? What's that?
Okay, so okay, medical purposes. For medical purposes, if you need to wash, you're allowed to. If a doctor tells you need to clean off this wound every day, even so far, the halacha says that if you, for whatever reason, had to take a long walk on Tisha B'Av, and your feet hurt, and because your feet hurt, you needed to wash your feet, you'd be allowed to do that. That would be considered a medical purpose. So if a doctor tells you, or if it's understood, that you need to wash yourself for medical purposes, that's acceptable. But for a mitzvah, if you are going to, let's say, the Talmud gives an example of a person who wants to visit the Rabbi on Yom Kippur. Tisha B'Av would be exactly the same. So he wants to visit his Rebbe, and the only way to visit his Rebbe is he has to walk through a river. Right? That's just how it goes. Let's say the bridge is gone, and the Rebbe's on the other side of the river. Walking through the river is clearly bathing, even if that's not your intent. But in such a case, since you're going to do a mitzvah, which is to visit your Rebbe, then you're allowed to do that. So there are, in such cases, one does have the ability to do certain types of cleaning of themselves. For instance, another is in some of the areas of the laws of Nida, a woman needs to clean herself I don't mean to bathe like she would for the mikvah, but cleaning herself in order to do some of the other things. And in that case, she'd be allowed to clean herself on Tisha B'Av in order to do the other things that she might do for bathing and washing. Children's and babies. So certainly babies, there's absolutely no question, babies are dirty. The babies can be washed as needed in order for them to be clean. Children who are dirty, you can clean them. They can be washed in order to make them clean. If the child understands the mourning, if they're old enough, 11, 12 years old, they have some concept of mourning, they should be encouraged not to be out playing in order that way they would get dirty. If they would get dirty, they can be cleaned. No, right? A child under bar mitzvah, they can be cleaned. Just not much different than us. If an adult gets dirty, if it's raining and you're walking from your house to the car and mud splashes on your legs, right? You're allowed to wash the mud off on Tisha B'Av, right? Even an adult for themselves. Anointing and cohabitation. So anointing is the rubbing or the application of oils or creams onto our body. So on Shabbos there's a forbidden activity like that. Also Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av. Different idea. In the case of Yom Kippur Tisha B'Av, it's because it is a pleasurable act. People enjoy, right? They like having these various oils or say creams rubbed into their skin, and therefore, if it's you're not allowed to do that for pleasure. That which comes to say that if you're rubbing in oils or creams on Tisha B'Av or Yom Kippur, and it's not for pleasure, like you need it for medication, somebody gets a cut and you need to rub in something onto their skin. If a child gets a sunburn and you need to rub onto their skin suntan oil, these would all be permitted. You'd be allowed to do that because that's not for pleasure. That's really done for medical purposes. Even though you're making up your own decision on that, you're not going to a doctor, but everyone knows if you need to put on sunscreen because somebody goes outside, then it's harmful if you don't, so then you'd be allowed to put it on. Deodorant also you're allowed to use, even if the deodorant is a roll-on, which would be an oil, or if it's even a little thicker like a gel, where it would be, you would put that on, that would be certainly like a cream. Those are both permissible. Because again, it's not for pleasure. You're doing it for another reason. Cohabitation simply is forbidden. The laws on Tisha B'Av are that a married couple should act like the woman is in the time of Nida. So there are all these various things called the harchakas. There's ways of distancing ourselves from each other during that period, and we would follow all of those laws that we would follow normally at that time. Even for a woman who's post-menstrual, she would follow the laws on Tisha B'Av because it has nothing to do with menstruation here. This has only to do with couples are not allowed to cohabitate on Tisha B'Av. Even if it is the night of the woman's going to the mikvah, you don't go to the mikvah on Tisha B'Av. So therefore, right, on the night of Tisha B'Av, right, the beginning of it, you don't go to the mikvah because you can't have relations. So you have to wait till after Tisha B'Av to go to the mikvah. Right? And even if the woman couldn't go afterwards and would have to wait a few days, she's still not allowed to go on Tisha B'Av. Wearing shoes. So the act of wearing shoes is specifically leather shoes. And that tells us two things. And many people make a mistake with this. One, many people think you can't wear shoes. And that's not true. You can wear any type of shoe that's not made out of leather, it's not covered in leather, or doesn't have leather on it. So if you have shoes that are canvas with leather pieces, you can't wear that. If you have shoes that are made out of wood with a leather covering, like clogs, they have a cover of leather, you can't use them. You have regular leather shoes you can't use. However, sneakers that are all man-made, that are not from leather, you'd be able to wear. You could wear slippers, you could wear what are those ones, the Crocs, you can wear Crocs, all that type of thing you're allowed to wear. It's not forbidden to wear shoes. And there are a number of times we're going to talk about where you are allowed to wear shoes. But just before we get there, the second point is when it says you're not allowed to wear leather shoes, it means shoes. That is to say, you're not allowed to wear shoes made of leather. You are allowed to wear a leather belt. You can wear a leather skirt. You can wear a leather hat. You can carry a leather belt. That's on Yom Kippur or on Tisha B'Av. It's only talking about leather shoes because traditionally leather shoes were comfortable. Right? You enjoyed wearing them. and therefore you couldn't wear leather. Wearing something other than leather was different and excluded. So therefore today you can go and buy walking shoes, you can buy runners, sneakers, whatever you want. As long as there's no leather in them, it's 100% acceptable to wear them. Now, other things is, that's what is prohibited in the streets. If you have to walk in the streets in public, and you will be humiliated by walking in the streets in shoes other than leather shoes by the people you're walking along with. Now today that really doesn't happen because people have, you can buy $500 sneakers and you'd have no reason to be humiliated by wearing sneakers, right? Certainly if you I don't know if you'd wear a tuxedo with sneakers, but you're allowed to, right? You wouldn't feel necessarily embarrassed. But if you were in a situation where you were, the Talmud says that a person who would be embarrassed or humiliated and they had to walk in public among non-Jews primarily who wouldn't understand what we're doing, then you'd be allowed to wear shoes in that case. You'd also, if you're required to take a long walk and it would hurt your feet, right? Now you're not supposed to take walks for pleasure on Tisha B'Av, but if you had some specific need, whatever that need would be, I don't know offhand what it is, but if you did, you could wear shoes. If the doctor says you have medical need, that you can't wear shoes other than leather shoes, you can wear shoes. Now in the first two cases, where you're choosing to wear shoes because of a specific need, not because the doctor told you, so in those cases what it says you should do is that you should put a little bit of sand in your shoe, so that you're really not walking entirely on the shoe. So it has at least some difference, that you can feel some difference than normal, but it doesn't mean to pour your shoes full of sand. It means they have enough in there that you feel it. Not that you'll feel like you're walking on it, but that you'll feel it in those cases. But otherwise, we don't wear shoes at all on any part of Tisha B'Av. Learning Torah. As I mentioned earlier, learning Torah is a joy, right? We're taught that it makes a person happy, it gives us fulfillment, and therefore on Tisha B'Av we don't learn Torah. However, we're also not supposed to do entertainment, right? We're not supposed to do things that takes our mind off of the morning, right? To just to go to the movies, for instance, or to go walking through shopping malls and go window shopping as a way of just using up the time, really goes against the spirit of the day. It doesn't literally go against the letter of the law, but the spirit, which is we're doing all of these things so that we should be conscious of the morning. We're not that we're doing these things and that's the end. The doing all of these things are the means to being conscious of a morning. By our taking things and doing things that would cause us not to think of morning, instead to think of something else, so then that's really not appropriate. It's not necessarily forbidden, depending what it is, but it's not necessarily appropriate because you are supposed to do things really that don't take you away from that. And therefore, to take a long walk in Tisha B'Av would be an example of something that's probably preferable not to do, since we take long, leisurely, nice walks. That's not the for Tisha B'Av. If you need to go somewhere, then you could take a long walk. But if you're just doing it for pleasure, one tries to desist from anything that is specifically pleasurable on this day. You don't have to be in pain, but you aren't supposed to do things that are pleasurable. Other issues. Here is the number one most misunderstood and potentially dangerous thing on Tisha B'Av is greeting people. You are not supposed to greet people on Tisha B'Av. You're not supposed to say hi. You're not supposed to say how are you. You're not supposed to greet people. Much the way a person feels after they lose a family member and you feel sort of isolated and you don't want to talk necessarily, you don't want to reach out to people in a verbal way. It's the same thing here. We don't greet people on Tisha B'Av. And that's very much misunderstood, and people do it all the time. And the response is, if somebody does greet you, you can respond a greeting to them, so not to be rude, but you should do it in a somewhat subdued way with the intention that they probably would remember that they're not supposed to do it because they hear that you're saying it differently. But you don't ignore a person if they greet you. You don't, snap at them. You don't. Right? You can respond, but you certainly shouldn't start the greeting. In fact, that even when one answers the phone, the custom is that they don't answer the phone saying hello. You could answer it with your name, Say, this is so-and-so, or you can answer it in another way. But the normal way of making a greeting, we don't do. That's until the middle of the day on Tisha B'Av, beginning at nightfall. Yes?
I heard before that you can't say hi or hello or peace or whatever, but you can ask how are you, because it's like a question, and it's like if you're like.
The problem with it is that that's become a greeting in our society, right? When I see people, I just say, how are you, right?
But
Instead of hi.
I recently went to a funeral, right, and whenever someone went up and said, oh hi, then they would like go back, but when they said how are you, then they actually calmed down a bit, because it was more, they had to think about it more. So
okay, I can understand the why you'd say it, but certainly a greeting we wouldn't say. I would think that that's somewhat of a greeting. Depends how you use it. Okay, if somebody hasn't been well and you ask them how they are, that's not a greeting. But if just to walk up to a friend of yours that you saw 3 hours ago and you say how are you, that means you're just saying hello. You're not thinking, right? So we should try not to. But what's more important is not to insult someone who doesn't know this law or who forgets, and we just ignore them. We don't just ignore them. You should respond. Just be a little bit more subdued than you might normally, and hopefully they'll realize why, and then they'll know not to say it again. If it's somebody, of course, that you are able to discuss Jewish law with and wouldn't mind that you told them that they made an error, then tell them. Right? But otherwise, you wouldn't.
But you're saying that's only up to midday?
Yes.
So
after midday, you can say hello. So the next thing is sending gifts. Sending gifts, according to the Talmud, is the same thing as greeting people. It's a way of saying hi, of welcoming, of having a connection with somebody, building a connection. So we don't send gifts on Tisha B'Av. Even if somebody has a baby, not on Tisha B'Av, and you know that you can't bring it, you're not going to give it to them on Shabbos when you go to shul, but you know they're going to be in shul on Tisha B'Av, and here's a perfect time for me to bring it, you shouldn't do that. You should not convey gifts, regardless of what their purpose is, on Tisha B'Av. Smoking. So today it's not such an issue anymore. Thank God, very few people smoke. But it was an interesting point. The overwhelming authorities who talk about smoking say that on a fast day you shouldn't smoke. On Tisha B'Av you shouldn't smoke, certainly in the morning. And the reason why is a very interesting point. There's an argument in halacha since smoking is in your mouth, it gives you an oral feeling, oral gratification, right? You get a feeling through inhaling it. So then there are opinions in the Shulchan Aruch, the Magen Avram, for instance, who feel that you need to make a bracha on cigarette smoke because it's like eating. It's similar to eating. Therefore, if it's similar to eating, you can't do it on a fast day. Right? That was his opinion. Of course, this was a few hundred years ago, but this smoking was smoking. Right? They just didn't realize what it could do, or it didn't do it. But today we try not to smoke at all. But basically, on a fast day, they didn't smoke. There was a very interesting opinion by a man known as the Marsham, who was the grandfather of Shalom Shvadran, who you might hear me quote. And he wrote that since it's a custom by non-Jews that they do not smoke on fast days, then Jews are allowed to smoke on fast days because they don't want us to follow the same customs when it comes to religious rituals. So today I don't think non-Jews fast at all. I don't think you find these fast days anymore that they had then. So that wouldn't necessarily apply. But the point is that what's the law of smoking? If a person smokes, they should not smoke at the night of Tisha B'Av or the morning Tisha B'Av. It would be allowed in the afternoon. That's only if you think that it's okay to smoke at all. Right? But if you are a smoker and you're addicted and you want to smoke, you should not smoke the night of Tisha B'Av or the morning. In the afternoon, it would then be allowed. Working. So, working on Tisha B'Av in and of itself is not forbidden. It's encouraged, especially to not work the night of Tisha B'Av and the morning of Tisha B'Av. It's hard to do. You can't even sit on a chair. Right? If you're able to not go in the morning, or the night of Tisha B'Av in the morning, the night of should be pretty easy, because the night's going to happen at 9 o'clock at night. Not too many of us are working then. But the next morning, you might want to go to work. It's really preferable not to. I don't mean it's like on Shabbos it's preferable not to work. On Shabbos you can't work. On Tisha B'Av it's preferable not to. It is somewhat better if you would do it in the afternoon. It says in the halacha that the expression says that if a person works on Tisha B'Av, there is no bracha from their work. What that means is you won't lose but you won't gain. So for instance, let's say you're working for an employer who doesn't care that it's Tisha B'Av, and he expects you at work on Tisha B'Av, for whatever reason. He expects you to be there, and you have to go. So if you go, right, if you go and you work on Tisha B'Av, you're not going to lose, right, because you did what your boss wanted, so you didn't lose, but you also won't gain. You won't have like an extremely successful day, or if you're in the stock market is not going to suddenly turn. Nothing great will come out of it, but at least you'll save yourself from a problem. So if you have to do that, you're allowed to save yourself from a problem. You don't have to put yourself in a situation where you could lose your job, or you could have a negative relationship with your employer because you didn't come. But if you could wait until the afternoon is preferable, and if you don't have to go at all, that's even more preferable. But it is not forbidden like it is on Shabbos or holidays. And again, the afternoon versus the morning are really very similar. That in every case, that is, that the afternoon is more lenient than the morning. And the reason being is that the major point of destruction was in the morning, even though the temple burnt all the way till noon of the next day, and therefore the morning is more severe. So we can, as I said earlier, you're allowed to sit on chairs in the afternoon, you're allowed to greet people in the afternoon, and if you didn't work in the morning and you had to work sometime, you should do it in the afternoon rather than the morning. It's a better time. So those are a few examples of things that become a little less at that point. Now the 10th of Av, we have to understand that really the majority of the destruction of the temple was actually on the 10th of Av, not on the 9th of Av. But the prophets felt that because the fire of the destructions of the temples began on the 9th of Av, and after the fire was lit, basically there was no more hope. The temple was gone. Even though it was still there, physically there, it was destroyed. It was going to be destroyed. So therefore, at that point, because there was no more hope, that's when we commemorate the destruction. Even though the actual destruction and its fulfillment to the end was not until the 10th day of Av, before the middle of the day. Because of that, we still keep the 9th day of Av, but on the 10th day of Av, we do have some restrictions. This year, however, we do not have restrictions. I'll explain why. Normally, because of what I said with the destruction, we would have restrictions in that you can eat and drink, of course, but you really should not wash your clothes, and you should not listen to music and get a shave or get a haircut from the time Tisha B'Av ends until the middle of the next day. That's a normal week that Tisha B'Av is on. However, if Tisha B'Av falls on certain days, that rule doesn't apply. So for instance, an example would be if Tisha B'Av fell on Shabbos, right? It fell on Shabbos. So when do we keep it? We keep it on Sunday, right? The 9th day of Av actually is a Saturday. But what we do is that we actually keep the fast on the next day because you can't fast on Shabbos. So therefore we fast the next day. So the next day after that would be the 11th of Av. We would not have any restrictions because it's over, right? We pushed off the day, but it doesn't continue. So then in that case, when it falls on Shabbos, we wouldn't have to. Also, when Tisha B'Av falls on Thursday, as it does this year, it ends on Erev Shabbos, understanding that there's a lot to do to get ready for Shabbos, so the laws of what you're not allowed to do are suspended if they're in relationship to preparation for Shabbos. So bathing, washing clothes, getting a haircut, shaving, all of that is permissible as the moment Tisha B'Av ends, and from then on. One should still stay away from listening to music, because of course there's no need to listen to music for preparing. But in those other areas, it's permissible. So you can, if you had someone who would cut your hair at 10:30 at night, you can have them come and cut your hair at 10:30 at night. But certainly in the morning, they can do it. They can cut your hair. You can do pretty much anything else that you need to do. You should cease from drinking wine when Tisha B'Av falls on a Thursday, but on Friday morning you shouldn't do it, but because you don't need that for Shabbos. But anything that you might need to help you prepare for Shabbos, that you can do. So and that's what happens this year. This year Tisha B'Av is on a Thursday, so Thursday night you can get your hair cut. Thursday night a man can shave, and Thursday night a woman could shave her legs and so forth. And from then on, you can do pretty much all the other things, right, that are in there, other than the few I mentioned. That takes us pretty much through most of it. Yes.
All right. So this year, when Tisha B'Av, Erev Tisha B'Av falls on Thursday night,
No, Erev Tisha B'Av falls on Wednesday night.
Wednesday night, oh,
So
okay.
Tisha B'Av's on Thursday,
Uh-huh.
right? That means the day after Tisha B'Av would be Friday, right? And therefore, we don't have those restrictions on Friday because we have to get ready for Shabbos, right? For me to say, okay, you can't bathe, and you can't get a haircut until 1:30 in the afternoon, puts a hardship, a very big hardship on people. Like for instance, there's probably not enough water, right, to bathe, everyone to bathe at one time. So you can bathe earlier. Right? That's why the laws are
And can you
different.
wash on Tuesday night? Wash clothes?
And this week, this year you can. Yes, you can. That's always the biggest problem I find, because people either are forced to schedule things right after Tisha B'Av or do, and don't remember, and then the next morning they're taking a trip somewhere, to Israel or wherever, right? You're already gone by Tisha B'Av, right? You're
No,
the
we're back. We're back.
Or you're back. Okay, so.
We're back.
But a lot of people, it's a very common time for vacations in the traditionally Orthodox community is the day after Tisha B'Av, for what they call Shabbos Nachamu, which is the next Shabbos. It's a very common time that people take vacations, and very often they'll schedule them for the next morning. And of course, the next morning you'll realize that you don't have any clean clothes, you haven't been able to clean yourself appropriately, and basically you're not ready for your trip, right? Because you didn't take that into account. So that's a very common problem that people come across. Any other questions? Yes.
We have this Sephardic minhag that we visit the cemetery on the day of Tisha B'Av. Are we allowed to recite the name of the kibbutz?
No, we wouldn't. We wouldn't say Tehillim. Because the idea is as follows. We have the same question by putting on tefillin in the afternoon. There is a law that when a person puts on tefillin, they should say the Shema, because the Shema talks about wearing tefillin. So you fulfill the mitzvah when you say the Shema. So the Talmud has a question. If it's, you put on your tefillin, you say the Shema, and then a little bit later on you say the Shema, right, in the prayers, the morning prayers, on a regular day. So you're saying it twice, so you only have to say it once. So what is this extra one? So they say, well, if you're saying one that's a little too late in the day, right, and Shema, it's too late for the mitzvah. So you say the first time I said Shema should be the mitzvah, and the second time should be learning, right? Because because it's too late. Or if it's the second time is within the time, you say the first one is for learning, the second one's for mitzvah. However, you're not allowed to learn on Tisha B'Av. Therefore, when you put on tefillin in the middle of the day of Tisha B'Av, you shouldn't say Shema. There are some people who have the custom to do so, but they shouldn't say Shema because it's learning Torah. There's the same thing here. If it's a part of a prayer service, as it is, then where you'd have Tehillim in there, then you'd be allowed to, not part of the service. If you're doing it as a part of a learning for the memory of somebody, that you couldn't. If you're doing it for the sake of mercy, asking mercy, then you'd be allowed to do it. It all depends on your intention in each case. Yes.
Is there a custom to wear white or anything, or is that?
No. The only time that you have that maybe on Yom Kippur. Some people wear white, but not on Tisha B'Av.
So you just said something. So on Tisha B'Av, your davening should omit the Shema?
No.
Because that
Men have a custom when they put on their tefillin to say the Shema when they put on their tefillin, right? So you say the worst thing I did was I learned the Torah, because the Shema is in the Torah, right? So that's the worst thing I've done. But on Tisha B'Av, it is the worst thing, because you're not supposed to learn Torah. So I was trying to correlate that to the saying of Tehillim, right, that Nora asked. I was showing the similarity between the two. But when you pray, there are a few things that you don't say in the prayer, but that's not it, right? Those things you would say. The parts that we don't say, for instance, there's a prayer called Mizmor L'Soda, which is a psalm. It's the song of the Todah offering, the Thanksgiving offering. And it says, Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha, you should serve God with happiness. So on Tisha B'Av and on Pesach and on Yom Kippur, we don't say that prayer. And the reason is because the sacrifice, the Thanksgiving sacrifice, had to be finished before the day ended. Now, most sacrifices could go a day, a night, and a day. So if you don't eat it today, you can eat it tomorrow. But the Thanksgiving sacrifice had to be eating today or tonight. That's it. Or tonight or today, right? Like our normal day. If you didn't eat it by the end of the sunset, then you broke the law. You wasted a sacrifice. That was a serious infraction. And on Tisha B'Av, you can't eat. right? So if you would offer the Thanksgiving sacrifice, you would not be able to fulfill it, right? Because you can't eat it until nightfall. At nightfall, it's too late. That means it was wasted, and you then made a sacrifice that was wasted. So therefore, since the prayers that we say are in lieu of sacrifices, we don't say that prayer, Mizmor Lasoda. So if you're in shul, if you would come to shul on Tisha B'Av morning, then you'll notice that we skip that, right? And a few other things. But that's, I doubt too many women come that early in the morning, but but certainly they can, because of the reading of the keynotes and the other things that we do as a part of it. Now, I didn't touch at all on the prayer service, but we can take a minute on it. Basically, the significance of the prayer service is the keynotes. Keynotes are dirges. They are poems that were written about various destructions that happened to the Jewish people. They include some of the like the Chelminsky massacres in the 1600s of the Jews. It includes all of the pogroms, which this was a part of. They had another one called Tat and Tat, which were others very serious massacres of Jewish people. It talks about the Spanish Inquisition. There are ones that talk about the Holocaust. There's ones that talk about the first destruction of the temple and the second destruction of the temple. And they've been handed down, depending on when they happened, since way back then, or the Holocaust is just the last 50 years. So these are sad poetry that we read. They're very difficult. They're very elaborate Hebrew, flowery Hebrew words. And it's hard for many people to understand what they say. But those are the essence of the prayers. In other words, you say your normal prayers that you always say, but the special prayers of Tisha B'Av are these keynotes. So if you can get them in English, you can understand some of it, but often they're still too poetic. What we usually do is that we have a period in the morning, which is why some women might come, where we read the keynotes and we have an explanation. Right? Each of the rabbis will get up and they'll take one of them and they'll explain for 3 minutes what it means. Otherwise, if you want to do it at home, the art scroll that has a special art scroll about Tisha B'Av has a very good commentary on most of the keynotes, most of these dirges that are said, and it's very worthwhile to read them. But if you can get someone who's educated and who knows the meaning behind them and some of the basis and the historical event they're referring to, of course it's very good, and it adds more meaning to why we're saying it. To simply sit in shul and say words we don't understand will not inspire us to feel the mourning at all. It won't help.